Welcome back to the We See Monsters channel. I'm your host Jenna, and today I have a terrifying encounter to share that also serves as a friendly reminder as to why you should never hike alone. I've done a lot of short solo hikes in my day, but after reading these stories, I think maybe I'll bring a friend next time. Honestly, you never know what could be lurking deep within the woods or mountains of some of these places that you're going to. We'll go ahead and jump right into it, but I hope you all enjoy this week's story. I've hiked a lot of different trails all over the US, but some of my favorite backpacking trips have been while hiking sections of the Appalachian Trail, mostly in and around the Blue Ridge Mountains. I have lots of other friends that enjoy backpacking in the same area, and we often swap stories of our adventures. Usually, they involve wildlife encounters, getting turned around and temporarily lost, getting soaked due to a freak rainstorm, and forgetting another pair of dry socks. Yes, this happened to me. Stuff like that. But I've also heard some stories from fellow hikers and encountered a few things myself that unsettled me and stuck with me long afterwards. These stories have a way of creeping into my thoughts and haunting me on the rare times I hike alone. I spoke with a good friend recently who told me about a backpacking experience that she had a couple of years ago. She's an experienced hiker and would sometimes go out on weekend trips, hiking various sections of trails through the Blue Ridge Mountains. This particular time, she described the weather as being clear and cool, with not a cloud in the sky. She had been hiking toward a favorite camping spot of hers that she'd been to several times before. She'd gotten a later start than she meant to that day, and the sun was starting to set by the time she got within about a mile of that spot. She said suddenly, this heavy fog rolled in out of nowhere. She remembered it being odd because the weather had been so clear a few minutes before that. Her visibility was limited to about 25 to 30 yards ahead of her, but she pressed on, knowing that her camping spot was only about a mile further down the trail. The whole time, she felt this sense of dread creeping up on her. Maybe a couple of minutes after this fog had rolled in, she noticed what looked like the vague outline of an elk standing in the middle of the trail. Elk aren't uncommon in the Blue Ridge Mountains, but they can be a lot more dangerous than most people realize. Inexperienced hikers, ignorant of the danger that elk can pose, have been known to approach them thinking that they're just gentle giants, and have frequently gotten seriously injured or even killed by them as a result. They're no joke. Knowing this, she stopped when she saw it, so as to keep her distance, and then started backing away very slowly. As she did so, to her dismay, it started slowly approaching her. The outline of the beast was still vague, but she could tell that it was bigger than any other elk she'd ever seen. As the shape started to materialize out of the fog, she also realized to her horror that this thing was not an elk. She could make out the shape of the elk-like antlers and the vague shape of the muzzle and part of the body. But the thing that truly startled her was that the beast was slowly loping towards her on two legs. As soon as she saw this, she turned and ran. Visibility was still very limited, and she had to dodge overhanging branches, tree roots, and large rocks as she ran in a blind panic. After about 10 minutes, she told me that the fog started to clear up, and the feeling of dread also faded a little bit along with it. She knew that there was no way she could make it back to her car before dark, so she got off the trail and made her way into the woods until she came to a spot which wasn't visible from the trail and where she felt safe setting up her tent. She described being hunkered down in her tent all night with her knife at the ready and hearing what sounded like an elk bellowing in the woods. If you've ever heard this, you know they can sound pretty unsettling. But she described this bellowing as being deeper and more guttural than a normal elk. At times, it even sounded like the thing was forming what sounded like they could have been words. Sometimes it was closer to her, sometimes further away, and, at one point, she thought she even heard a second one. The bellowing faded off into the distance as it started getting light outside. She waited until it was bright enough outside to pack up and then booked it out of there. She didn't go backpacking in the mountains for a year after that experience, and now only goes with friends. For more spooky content, you can click the link below to check out my TikTok and listen to the We See Monsters podcast.